It's good to see you all here, and greetings especially to those that I haven't met before. 6 years ago, in Topeka, Kansas, in the middle of the United States, was a funeral of a beloved man. And several of us got to know him when we attended the Feast of Tabernacles with Paul Erbaum and his wife in 2019 at the Feast of Tabernacles in Estonia, Eastern Europe. Paul was a special guy. He was always very gracious and he was kind throughout the feast. And during one of our meals, his wife remarked that her husband, Paul, was the nicest man she had ever known. They raised 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. But it was just 6 weeks after the feast, about this time of year, that he fell ill and went to the hospital. He thought he was stricken with pneumonia, and unfortunately, he was suffering from an aggressive form of cancer, and that would take his life within a matter of weeks. And then, and so my wife and I drove to Kansas, about a 5 or 6 hour drive to the funeral. And we were somewhat stunned that the receiving line at the funeral home for the viewing extended outside the building. It was very long. It was standing room only on the then on the next morning at the funeral. And the fellow Paul was a high school teacher, secondary teacher. And at the funeral, his superintendent had read his obituary page. He had written the obituary that was really an outstanding praise of Paul. Now, the superintendent spoke at the funeral, and he was not a church member either, but he said that Paul was the everything that a Christian could hope to be. And that funeral service was standing room only. I counted 160 people inside the main room of the funeral home, and others were standing along the walls and in the foyer. And then during the funeral, several of his children spoke fondly at length about their father. His brother and sister reiterated what a nice man he was. The principal again spoke about his outstanding qualities. And one of his former students from 40 years ago spoke about his teacher's patience and gentle nature. And as we walked away from the funeral, several of us wondered, how could we ever measure up to the Christian example set by Paul Erbaum? We all felt as though that we had so much more to do in this life to be considered to be such an exceptional person. And so the title of today's message is, Are we likable to God and man? Are we likable to both God and man? I happened to stumble across an article in Forbes magazine that explored the reasons why some people are particularly likable. And this article by Travis Bradbury went through 13 habits. Well, many people believe that have a mistaken belief that being likable comes from kind of a natural, unteachable traits that only belong to a lucky few. If you're good looking and you're very social, incredibly talented, well, it's easy to fall prey to this misconception. In reality, being likable is under our control. It's a matter of what we call emotional intelligence. There was a study by the University of California in Los Angeles where they took people and they rated 500 adjectives or descriptive words that had some relationship to likability. And the top rated adjectives had nothing to do with being gregarious, intelligent, or attractive. Those are innate characteristics that we're born with. Instead, the top adjectives were sincerity, transparency, capacity for understanding another person. These adjectives and others like them describe people who are described or skilled in the social side of emotional intelligence. Talent Smart, an employment agency, uh, had research data from more than 1 million people that shows that people who possess those skills aren't just highly likable, they outperform on the job those who do not. Well, we did some digging for key behaviors about emotionally intelligent people, what makes them so likable. And I'm going to go through those and show how those are actually biblical characteristics, that really quite remarkable biblical characteristics. Um, and I'm going to go through the 13 points in reverse order. So we'll start with number 13. And the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to number 13 is they ask questions. The biggest mistake is when people come to listen, they're so focused on what they're going to say next or how the other person or what the other person is going to say or how it will affect them, they fail to hear what's actually being said. The words come through loud and clear, but the meaning could be lost. A simple way to avoid this is to ask a lot of questions. We can turn to Luke chapter 11, verse 9. Luke chapter 11 and verse 9. People like to know that you're listening. And something as simple as a clarification question shows that not only are we listening, but we also care about what they're saying. We would be surprised at how much respect and appreciation that we gain just by asking questions. So in Luke 11, verse 9, so I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, uh, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. Next verse in Luke 11, verse 10. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. It's like if we went to the door of someone's house, but we just stood there, we didn't knock, or we didn't ask. Uh, we would not have entrance into their lives. In Matthew 7 and verse 7, in Matthew 7 and verse 7, again it's repeated. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. In Matthew 7, verse 8, for everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. This concept is not new about being the importance of asking, to search for the truth. In Proverbs 8:17, Proverbs 8:17, we read, I love those who hate me, or excuse me, I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently will find me. Seeking diligently, earnestly is important. This is followed up in Jeremiah 29:13. In Jeremiah 29:13, and you will seek me and find me, and when you search for me with your whole heart. So it's a matter of the heart. It's a matter of diligence. So a matter of being likable is that we should ask questions. Number 12, another characteristic of being likable, and of course, this I couldn't say 20 years ago. Uh, to be likable, people put away their phones uh, during a conversation. Nothing really what it amounts to is not being interrupted. Nothing will turn off a person in the middle of a conversation if you go to answer a text message or even glance at your phone. If you're committed to a conversation, focus on all your energy on that conversation. And you'll find that the conversations are more enjoyable and effective when you immerse yourself in them. In Psalm 119, verse 69, in Psalm 119:69, it gives us this idea of focus on what's in our heart. Psalm 116:69. The proud have forged a lie against me, but I will keep your precepts with my whole heart. The speaker here, the psalmist, is writing about the precepts of God, keeping that close, not being distracted. We're also in Psalm 119. Let's try to verse 145. I cry out with my whole heart. Hear me, O Lord. I will keep your statutes. So again, it's a matter of the heart, of focus, of concentration. I was at my barber shop recently, and I was talking to the barber and asking, since there are several barbers and a number of customers at all times, don't you get distracted? And he said, when I have a customer in my chair, my sole focus is on that customer in the chair. Nothing can distract me from doing a good job at focusing on my customer. And I thought, how marvelous if that attitude could be spread for all of us to our Christian lives. In Mark 12 and verse 28, in Mark 12 and verse 28, we read, then one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, perceiving that he had delivered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus went on to explain about loving God with your whole heart and soul and mind and strength, and then loving your neighbor as yourself. And the scribe was listening and said, well said, teacher, you've spoken the truth. We jump down to what Jesus' response was in verse 34. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, surely you are not far from the kingdom of God. Well, this is a very important characteristic of being likable. It's focusing, being concentrating on listening by not being distracted. The short version is number 12 is to put away the phone, but the really issue is do not be distracted. We're working our way backwards from 13 to number 1. And number 11 is people who are likable are genuine. Being genuine and honest is essential to being likable. No one likes a fake. People gravitate to the people who are genuine because they know they can trust them. It is difficult to like someone when you don't know who they really are and how they really feel. Likable people know who they are. They're confident enough to be comfortable in their own skin. And by concentrating on what drives you and makes you happy, you become a much more interesting person. The If you turn to Psalm 34 and verse 12, Psalm 34 and verse 12. Who is the man who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? The being genuine, a person who desires life. Also in Psalm 34, verse 13, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. In the King James Version of the Bible, it says, keep your lips from speaking guile. Verse 14, depart from evil and do good, seek peace, pursue it. These are all part of being genuine. In Psalm 32, verse 2, blessed is the man in whom the Lord does not impute the iniquity or sin, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. Again, in the King James Version, it would say guile, no guile. In Revelation 14:15, we're reading an end time prophecy. And if we look at Revelation 14, starting in verse 5, about the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him the 144,000. And it goes on to describe then the scenario in that case. And those, verse 4, those who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, they're redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to God and the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, or in other translations, no guile. In other words, they're genuine. You can believe what they say. So, people, number 11, people who are likable are genuine. Counting backwards, number 10, people who are guile, they don't pass judgment. Another way to say this is they are not quick to condemn. If you want to be likable, we must be open minded. And being open minded makes us approachable and interesting to others. No one wants to have a conversation with someone who already has a fully formed opinion and is not willing to listen. And if you have an open mind, it's uh, crucial in the workplace where approachability means access to new ideas, uh, new ways of doing things, and how you can help or get help. To eliminate preconceived notions and judgment, you need to see the world through other people's eyes. This doesn't require us to believe what other people believe or condone their behavior. It simply means we don't pass judgment or condemnation long enough to truly understand what makes them tick. Only then can we let them be who they are. In Proverbs 14, in verse 29, in Proverbs 14, verse 29, we read, he who is slow to wrath has great understanding, but he who is impulsive exalts folly. So if we take our time, we don't get excited, don't get angry right away, just take the time to listen. We can develop understanding. But we read here, who is impulsive exalts folly. Well, that's the same root word as foolish. We don't want to be foolish. In Proverbs 15, verses 1 and 2, this patience uh, about not being quick to condemn is summarized in Proverbs 15, verses 1 and 2. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So being relaxed, not being quick to condemn, can help us to be likable. In James 1:19, the apostle James summarizes it this way in James 1:19. So then, my brethren, beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. To take our time to listen to someone and not be willing to condemn them too quickly. In Proverbs 18:13, last verse in this number, Proverbs 18:13. He who answers a question or a matter before he hears it, it is a folly and shame to him. So people must wait for the entire message in order to have full understanding and to not be foolish or shameful. So point number 10 is a likable person is not quick to condemn or not quick to judge. Point number 9, a likable person does not seek attention. Does not seek attention. People are averse. They don't like those who are desperate for attention. You don't need to develop a big extroverted personality to be likable. Simply being friendly and considerate is all we need to win people over. When we speak in a friendly, confident, and concise manner, we will notice that people are much more attentive and uh, persuadable than if we try to show them that we're important. People catch on to our attitude quickly, and they're more attracted to the right attitude than what or how many people we know. When you're being given attention, such as when we're being recognized for an accomplishment, shift the focus to all the people who worked hard to help you get there. This may sound cliche, but if it's genuine, the fact that you pay attention to others and appreciate them and their help will show that you're appreciative and humble. Those are two adjectives, appreciative and humble, that are closely tied to likability. We read in Matthew 6 and verse 1. In Matthew 6 and verse 1, take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. In other words, whatever you get in this life. If you blow your own horn, let others honor you accordingly. In James 4, verse 10, in James 4 and verse 10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. This is all summarized, this point number 9 about not seeking attention, is summarized in Proverbs 27, verse 2. In Proverbs 27, verse 2, let another man praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips. So, if we want to be likable, likable people characteristics is they don't seek the attention. Point number 8, likable people are consistent. Likable people are consistent. Few things make a person more unlikable than when they're all over the place. When people approach them, they like to know they're dealing with and what sort of response they can expect. To be consistent, we must be reliable. We must ensure that in the event that if your mind goes up and down, it doesn't affect how you treat other people. We must treat other people consistently. In Psalm 33, verse 11, in Psalm 33, verse 11, the counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. God is consistent. We can rely on God because of his consistency. And it's consistent then throughout the generations. We turn to Hebrews 13 and verse 8. Hebrews 13 and verse 8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Do not be carried about by various and strange doctrines. In other words, he's not bouncing all over the place in his teachings. We should follow that example by being consistent in our lives as well. Ephesians 4:14 Ephesians 4:14 puts this in a more graphic description. Ephesians 4:14, we should no longer be children tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by the cunning craftiness of deceitful plot. Notice it says being tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. Some people are religious hobbyists. The latest shiny thing they get distracted by instead of the fundamental truths that God is trying to teach us. And they're tossed about by every wind, every new of the latest a little nuance of some sort, and they get distracted. So let's be consistent. Likable people, point number 8, they are consistent. Then point number 7, likable people use positive body language. So if we are cognizant or understanding of our gestures, our expressions, and our tone of voice, and we're making certain what we're doing and saying and how we're acting is positive, it will draw people to you like ants to a picnic. Using an enthusiastic tone, uncrossing our arms when we talk, maintaining eye contact, leaning toward the person who's speaking, and they're all forms of positive body language that high emotionally intelligent people use to draw others in to demonstrate likability. Positive body language can make all the difference in a conversation. It's true how you say something can even be more important than what you say. If we turn to Ephesians 6 and verse 14, Ephesians 6, verse 14, we read, "Stand firm, therefore, having girded your waist in truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness." Standing firm is really a positive body language. People are not going to be puzzled as to where you are, who you are. So, point 7 is likable people use positive body language. Point 6, likable people leave a strong first impression. I should probably reword that and leave a good first impression. A strong first impression might even be bad. Research shows that most people decide whether or not they like someone within the first 7 seconds of meeting that person. Then they spend the rest of the conversation internally justifying their initial reaction. Now, this may sound scary, but knowing this, you can take advantage of it by making huge gains in likability. The first impressions are tied intimately to body language, positive body language, uh, strong posture, a firm handshake, smiling and opening your shoulders to the person you're talking to will help ensure our first impression is a good one. In Ephesians 5 and verse 15, Ephesians 5:15, "See then that you walk circumspectly, and not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil." So, uh, making a strong impression, walking circumspectly, being careful about what we do, how we're seen, where we are. In 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 22, in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 22, I've been reading in the New King James, unless otherwise quoted. I'm going to read this in the modern English version, the MEV. 1 Thessalonians 5:22, "Abstain from all appearance of evil." And in order to leave a good first impression, we don't want it to leave open any possibility that somebody could think ill of us. Point number 5, likable people greet other people by name. Likable people greet others by name. Our name is an essential part of our identity, and it feels terrific when people use our own name. Likable people make sure that they use other people's names every time they see one. You shouldn't use someone's name only when you greet them. Research shows that people feel validated, they feel worthwhile when the person they're speaking to refers to them by name during the conversation. If you're great with faces, but you have trouble with names, you can have some fun uh, working on it by remembering people's names a brain exercise. When you meet someone, don't be afraid to use their name a second time if you forget it, uh, uh, so you don't forget it immediately after you hear it. And you'll need to keep the name handy if you're going to remember it the next time you see him or her. I've done that at the feast on somebody I didn't know. I keep a note card in my pocket. I jot down the name of the person that I just met. Uh, and that will help formalize my memory for another person's name. Now, uh, I was a high school and college level teacher for 20 years. And in a high school class, I told the students that I will remember all of their names. Uh, and of course, this is in America. In August, I told them I will learn all of their names by Thanksgiving, which is in November. And one student bumped another one and said, he's not kidding uh, about remembering names. But I had little hints on how to help me remember. Every student had a name placard. They all had a binder with their name on it. So I had some assistants so I could call everyone by name every day, and they wouldn't know if I remembered them or not. But by having name badges or tags on, I was able to do that. But in an environment where you don't have name badges or tags, I write them down. In First Thessalonians 5 and verse 11. In First Thessalonians 5 and verse 11. And I will read this in the Common English Bible, the CEB translation. So continue encouraging each other and building each other up, just like you are doing already. So the characteristic then, number 5, is greeting people by name, a characteristic of likable people. Point number 4, likable people smile. People naturally and unconsciously, they don't realize it, but they mirror the body language of the person they're talking to. So if you want someone to like you, you smile at them during the conversation, and they will unconsciously return the favor, and then they will feel good as a result. So the smiling works. In Proverbs 15 and verse 30. In Proverbs 15 and verse 30, I'll read this in the NET, the New English Translation. A bright look brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the body. A bright look, an uplifting smile, joy to the heart. In Proverbs 17, in verse 22, in Proverbs 17, of verse 22, and I'll read this in the Good News Translation, the GNT. Being cheerful keeps you healthy. It is slow death to be gloomy all the time. Being cheerful helps you to be healthy, but it also encourages other people. We're in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 16, verse 20. He who heeds the word wisely will find good, and whoever trusts in the Lord, happy is he. You see, when we dig into the word, when we dig into the Bible, we will find good, and we will then be able to trust in our Creator. And it tells us, happy is he. And what do you do when you're happy? You smile. So point number 4 is likable people smile. Point number 3, likable people know when to open up. Likable people know when to open up. We must be careful about sharing personal problems and confessions too quickly, as this will get us labeled as a complainer. Likable people let the other person guide them when it's the right time to open up. We all know people who say, I'm going to tell it like it is, and they don't have a filter. They don't consider their words carefully. They open up too quickly. And they say, well, I'm just going to tell you like I see it. You're dumb and ugly and your mother dresses you funny. Well, that's not very complimentary or favorable. They're opening up too soon. They haven't gotten to know someone. That's not how you encourage likability. If we turn to James 5 in verse 16, the Apostle James wrote in James 5:16, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. So uh, when we only open up when we basically have permission from the other person, when we're careful and we have a filter uh, to choose what we say, we become more likable. Many years ago, the author Zig Ziglar wrote, uh, uh, he was an inspirational author and writer. He said, share your goals with somebody who can support you. You share your go up goals with somebody who will support you. If you want to get rid of a habit, go down goals, he calls them. You share those with everyone. So everyone is a policeman to help you get rid of an idea or a concept. But if you've got certain private, personal goals or business goals, you share them only with supporters so others don't sabotage your goals. So you don't open up to the wrong people. In Proverbs 11, verse 13, in Proverbs 11:13, I'll read this in the Common English Bible. A slanderer walks around revealing secrets, but a trustworthy person keeps a confidence. So if you open up too soon to the wrong person, they could reveal things that you would rather be kept private. But a trustworthy person keeps a confidence that makes a trustworthy person then more likable. So point 3 is likable people know when to open up. Point number 2, likable people know who to touch and they touch them. When we touch someone during a conversation, we release a hormone called oxytocin in the brain. It's a neurotransmitter that makes our brains associate us with trust and other positive feelings. A simple touch on the shoulder, a hug, or a friendly handshake is all that it takes to release oxytocin, that feel good hormone. Uh, an unwanted or inappropriate touching has the opposite effect. Remember that relationships are not built just on words, but also from general feelings about each other. So, touching somebody appropriately is a great way to show that we care. If we take a look at Matthew 8 and verses 1 through 3, in Matthew 8, verses 1 through 3, we have the explanation of Jesus Christ and the incidents of coming in contact with a leper. Matthew 8, starting in verse 1, and when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, this much we know about lepers is it's transmissible from person to person. So lepers you would never touch a leper. They would have to live separately in a leper colony. They wouldn't mix with the regular population. Yet in verse 3, in Matthew 8, verse 3, Jesus put out his hand and touched him and said, uh, because the leper said, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Jesus said, I am willing. And he cleansed and immediately, be cleansed, and immediately the leprosy was cleansed. So Jesus knew when the right time to touch was for the cleansing of the leper. In Matthew 8, we're right there in verse 14 and 15. When Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's, Peter's wife's mother, sick with a fever. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. That was a quick turnabout, where she got up and acted the part of a host. We also can read Matthew in chapter 19, in verses 13 through 15, about the blessing of little children. What did Jesus do? He bade them to come to him, and he held them, and he blessed them. So point number 2 is likable people know who to touch and when to touch, and then they touch them. Point number 1, likable people balance passion and fun. People gravitate toward those who are passionate. And when we say that, it's easy for passionate people to come across as too serious or uninteresting because they tend to get absorbed in their work. But likable people balance their passion with the ability to have fun. At work, they're serious yet friendly. Likable people still get things done because they're socially effective in short amounts of time. They capitalize on valuable social moments. They minimize small talk and gossip, instead, focus on having meaningful interactions with their coworkers. They remember what you said to them yesterday or last week, which shows that you're just as important to them as work. In Galatians 5:22, we read about the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit is love, and then notice the word joy enters in. So joy is part of balancing passion and fun. Getting things done and having fun while you're doing it can contribute to joy. So a likable person balances passion and fun. What are those 13 habits of likable people? Number 13, they ask questions. They're curious and they're willing to learn. Number 12, they're willing to pay attention to others, which includes putting away their phones. Number 11, likable people are genuine. They're without guile or deception. Number 10, likable people are not quick to condemn. They don't pass judgment quickly. Number 9, likable people don't seek attention. They demonstrate humility. Number 8, likable people are consistent. You can rely on what they say and what they do. Number 7, likable people use positive body language. They position themselves for success. Number 6, likable people leave a strong and a positive first impression. Or as they say, they suit up, they show up, uh, and they're ready. They're ready to go to work or ready for the situation at hand. Point number 5, likable people greet others by name. They personalize the relationship and use other people's names in the conversation. Characteristic number 4, likable people smile. A likable person lets everyone know that they're a happy person. Point number 3, likable people know when to open up. They know likable people are careful with their relationships. And so you can trust them and they can trust you. Point number 2, likable people know who to touch, when to touch, and then they actually touch them because that's an important part of communication. And so they have the right sensibility about touching. Point number 1, they balance passion and fun. Likable people capitalize on the joy in our lives. Well, each of us every day must prepare for the time when we must appear before the throne of God, give account for our lives. So, when we practice likability with our brothers and neighbors, with those we come in contact with, we can then practice being likable. And we can ask ourselves then that question every day: how likable are we to God? Because being likable to others, if we're going to love one another and practice the love of God, and that is part of it, loving one another, we are demonstrating that we are becoming more likable to God.